Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. Welcome, everyone. I'd just like to introduce myself. This is Ashley from the Awella Sister Circle 2014. I'm a member of the Blue Water
Right now
family.
I'm going to pour libation, which is basically the opening of the space, so we can proceed. But before I proceed, may I have permission from an elder to proceed? So you can just simply raise your hand or nod your head, or give me a smile, give thanks. Thank you. All the means. Okay, it's a little bit interactive. Hold that. I'm basically going to start off by saying the word Ador, and the response to the word is Amen, and it simply means that I'm calling, and Amen means I'm listening. Okay, so we'll go on through once. Ador.
Amen. Greetings, quartet, brothers and sisters. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Before I go any further, I'd like to say thank you very much. And lots of appreciation to Amunet, and if we could give her a round of applause please. She's been working very hard to keep this going. Anyway, let me just give you some context before I introduce Dr. Finch. My journey started around about 1983, and I was sitting up in the hills in St. Anne's, Jamaica. When Brother Desmond Longmore gave me a little booklet, and it was an introduction to the works of Gerald Massey. Now I sat down there and read this book, and in fact it was on loan, so I copied it verbatim and brought it back to England. I said, well, this is, how can this be? How can this English scholar have written this stuff? And there's me growing up in England not knowing about this information. So my journey was when I came back to the UK was to sort out Gerald Massey and all his works. This is 1983. Shortly afterwards, I discovered Ancient Egypt, the work of Gerald Massey. 2 volumes. I spent the next year going through the 2 volumes, and by summer of 84 I was in Egypt. In 85, I came across an advert for a talk with Sheikh Anta Diop in Hackney. I missed the Saturday talk, but I came along on the Sunday expecting to meet Sheikh Anta Diop. He wasn't there, but there was a presentation by Dr. Ivan van Sertima. Now during that presentation, or afterwards I would say, somebody asked a question about something to do with Christianity or Jesus Christ. Now, Dr. Van Sertima said, well, he wouldn't answer it, but there's one of his colleagues who was sitting next to him would answer the question. And there was Dr. Finch sitting there calmly, just taking the view, nonchalantly, and he answered the question. Now when I heard what he was saying, I said, at last I found someone who understands Massey. So that's how I first discovered Dr. Charles Finch. Now, during that period, from 85 through to about 89, I made up to 6 trips to Egypt, and Dr. Finch and I corresponded on a regular basis, either through letter, telephone calls, and when he came over to lecture, we met up, and he even gave us a couple of private lectures. If you can remember that, Charles, we had some places in Wood Green, in front rooms. We did all this administration. But subsequently, in 1989, I set up a small company called Jet Arts, and we decided to do our first, and I believe it could have been the first, or may have been the first African-centered trip to Egypt. And I asked Dr. Finch if he'd like to come along. Thinking, well, he's not gonna, he's too busy. He's got too many other things to do. He's writing, by this time now he's the associate editor of the Journal of African Civilization, a journal that resonated around the world, edited by Dr. Van Sertima himself. And I got an answer back saying, yes, he would gladly accompany us. And I said, well, why don't you lead the group as our principal speaker? And that's how Dr. Finch came. For the next 2 years, we did trips to Egypt, study tours based from here in London. Now we had the people paying from as far afield as Nigeria. We had people from New York, people from the Caribbean, as well as here in the UK, who travelled with us on those 2 trips. So by that time now, myself and Dr. Finch had established a working relationship and a good friendship as well. And I was fortunate to be able to have read both the Echoes of the Dark Land and start the beginning in manuscript form before they were published. So I kind of had a pre-release look at the information before most people. So anyway, that's how my relationship with Dr. Finch developed. And we eventually, when the trips ceased for a while, we still ended up meeting in Egypt, where occasionally I would take a small group and we meet up and we share these lectures. But anyway, that's the kind of a background that I'm coming from. And up to this point now, so it's really, when you think of it, that's 31 years, Dr. Finch. Yeah, so almost 2 generations. And it's good. This is the first time we've actually physically met in the last 22 years. What people need to understand is that Dr. Finch here is, he may disagree with me, but I would say he's the modern day Renaissance man. Because when you think about going through the Enlightenment, when you talk about people, the so-called French philosophers having medicine, working with spirituality, there are very few scholars in our field who have that breadth of knowledge, breadth and depth of knowledge. On the one side you have hard medical science. Sitting with Dr. Finch, you can talk about biological evolution on the one hand, deep medicine and physiology on the other hand, and you could be talking also about deep spirituality, as we saw last Friday and to come. Those are the expressions who've gone to the daytime sessions. So this is why, and I know I can see he's sort of putting his head down, but yes, I would say that we need to make the most of Dr. Finch, because he's coming from a line that goes back, and I would again put him on the line and say he's coming back from Imhotep, going right through, and I know he's shaking his head there, but the breadth of knowledge and to be able to encompass all of this, which may seem on the one hand contradictory, especially if you listen to someone like René Descartes who says you're dividing the spirit and the soul is different, and the mind and body is separated. Now we have a scholar who's bringing this back together.
As he mentioned, he is the one that took me on my first 2 trips to Egypt. So we also share a fervent admiration and immersing in the voluminous works of Gerald Massey from the 19th century. And someone whose works shaped profoundly my own writings and thinking. But this tour, me being in this tour, is virtually the entire brainchild of Amanat Hall. She's the one that made it happen. Indefatigable energy and drive. And she is the one that's making sure that it goes well. And I bow to her. Okay, some of you are here and you're wondering, okay, what does this mean? What does this title signify? Ages and Convergence. The Great Mother of the Waters meets the Cosmic Ethiopian King. Some who have perhaps been in some of our earlier lectures and workshops have an inkling of what this might be referred to, but we're going to go into this in depth and detail. And the reason why, because it's supremely pertinent and important, not just in an intellectual sense, but in what's going to happen in the world, and everybody in it, including everybody in this room. And you'll get a sense of that, perhaps, at least I hope you do, as we go through this.
I'm going to share one more piece while I see the big man is still signing away.
This piece is very relevant to what we've been speaking this evening, what's been shared with us. I have this piece, I've got a lot of poetry and songs and raps and chants, which I'm going to bring forward very soon, and it's related to the seas. And one of the pieces which I've been sharing over the last few years is one about the mermaid. And through sharing this piece, as I said earlier on, I share word, power and sound, and sometimes people come to me and tell me what I'm saying, you know, through their interpretation, and it just opens my mind to say, you know, give thanks, because you're just sharing and people have to give you the feedback, you know. So this piece here, it's a section of something much bigger, but it's called The Mermaid. But what I'm going to need is some audience participation. But you don't look like you're ready. You know, you look a bit like you're alive, we don't know, you know. But I'm going to need some audience participation because we're going to have to be on one ship right now. Yeah? Yes. That's good. So, the motivation is this: we're sailing on a big ship. We have to see ourselves way, way back. Like as if we are the Moors of such an era, going way back centuries, 14th century. And we are sailing across this sea. We've been sailing for many, many, many months, etc. And we've come to a certain point where we know we're near to our destiny. But in order for our ship to keep sailing, we need some motivation. So as the captain of the ship, I turn to the people and I say that I see a mermaid which has guided me. And the mermaid has told me that if we keep sailing on this same direction and the same course where we're heading, we will reach our promised land. And the motivation for this piece is when I say, if you touch her, she will